By the time the Second World War ended in 1945, Europe was in ruins. The daunting task of rebuilding and planning a better future began. The 1950s brought a spirit of new beginnings, and Robert Schuman, the French foreign minister, gave a speech outlining a vision of France, West Germany, Italy and the Benelux countries, sharing strategic resources in order to build a lasting peace in Europe. 1 year later, at the Treaty of Paris, the European Coal and Steel Community was founded, a common steel and coal market with freely set market prices and without import or export duties. The first manifestation of the European Community was born. The need for an external representation for the newly formed European Community was apparent right from the start. When Jean Monnet set up a transatlantic office in 1954, the first foundation stone of the external relations of the European Community was laid. Europe's first steps to be present in the wider world coincided with the dismantling of European empires, beginning in 1957 with the independence of Ghana. The Treaty of Rome that year recognised the relationship of the founding 6 members to their overseas territories, mainly in Africa. A 5-year development fund was set up. This fund was used for capital aid programmes to develop infrastructure, like roads, hospitals and schools. Contract teams administering the funds were typically drawn from European engineering consultancies, resident in the countries. But the old colonial empires were changing, both for the European colonial powers and the newly independent nations. The Commission's contract teams soon found themselves dealing with new issues, especially in Africa, where newly independent countries sought to establish diplomatic relations with Europe. During the 1960s, a new relationship was formalised under the Yaoundé Conventions, and a post-colonial development agreement was established, the European Development Fund. The contract teams were replaced by a new agency, the European Agency for Cooperation. From 1965 onwards, 21 offices were established in the associated countries. These offices were charged with implementing the grant aid of the new fund, dealing mainly with internal development issues. In Europe, the effects of the Cold War intensified with the building of what was to become the iconic symbol of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall. While in Western Europe, walls were coming down. In 1968, the customs union was completed and goods now passed freely and unchecked across the borders of the member states. In the mid-1970s, the first Lomé Convention was signed between Europe and 46 founding African, Caribbean and Pacific states. Lomé was a modern international partnership convention, replacing the old post-colonial model. Lomé redefined the relationship between Europe and developing countries. It addressed more than just development cooperation. Now trade, regional integration, political issues and cultural cooperation were on the agenda. European delegation offices were charged specifically with the responsibility of implementing the Lomé Convention, and the number of these delegations doubled. The European Community continued to grow, with the accession of Ireland, the UK and Denmark. The mid-70s also saw the signing of community protocols with 8 southern and eastern Mediterranean countries. The relationship and attention given to Latin America was strengthened when Spain and Portugal joined. Stronger ties were also developed in Asia. Europe became more professional in its dealings with the rest of the world. An international European personality was steadily being created to deal with the changing world. By 1980, there were 50 delegation offices around the world. Delegations opened at the rate of 5 a year, as Europe took an increasing role in world affairs. The need for a common foreign policy became more pressing, and a common foreign and security policy was eventually formalised in 1992 by the Maastricht Treaty. The end of the Cold War forced further changes to foreign policy. In light of the problems faced by Europe in reacting to the conflicts that erupted after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, particularly in the former Yugoslavia, the EU created a European security and defence policy. A rethink of the external service led to a major overhaul in 1998 when the Amsterdam Treaty established the position of High Representative.
We have to move towards a more active and less declaratory foreign policy. Our words have to be matched by deeds.
Europe began to intensify its efforts to play an international political and security role, more in line with its economic status. Military or police forces were now sent to areas of crisis to carry out humanitarian operations, peacekeeping, crisis management, and even peacemaking. Military action could also be carried out by an EU rapid reaction force. The fall of the communist regimes also demanded a response, and the EU set up programs to help the transition to democratic, market-orientated economies. The implementation of these programs coincided with the establishment of new delegation offices across Central and Eastern Europe. Europe also looked to its southern and Middle Eastern neighbours. In 1995, the 15 member states of the EU came together with 12 governments from the region. The Euro-Mediterranean Partnership promoted democracy, human rights and cooperation among the partners. Now in 2007, the EU has expanded to 27 member states, effectively pushing the European border further east to a new set of neighbours. The European Neighbourhood Policy emerged to help the EU's neighbours benefit from the possibilities offered by an enlarged EU and to support their own reforms. Today, the EU is the world's largest donor of development assistance, accounting for more than half of the world's official aid. The External Service has 130 delegations and 5,000 members of staff, presenting, explaining and implementing the EU's external policy. Today, Europe has a global reach, facilitating trade and development, supporting human rights and free elections in order to promote democratic values.
We have to work with all our partners in order to make issues go forward and thus bring the international community together. And the more we can do, the more effective we will be. This is what we call effective multilateralism.
For 50 years, the European dream has ensured peace on the continent. In a world of global threats and challenges, the Europe of the 21st century will continue to tackle the current concerns of its citizens, such as the economy, quality of life and security. It will also become a stronger global player committed to multilateralism, using its foreign policy tools of aid, trade and economic agreements to promote human rights, democracy, freedom and justice throughout the world.